Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. My name is Lisa Famularo. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a career coach with the Center for Career Development. And I'd like to introduce my colleague as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aaliyah Castleberry. My pronouns are also she, her, and I'm excited to join you all today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aaliyah. So we'll dive in and introduce our presenters in just a second, but before we go ahead and do that, wanted to give a brief introduction of today's event, as well as explain a few logistics about how things are going to go. So as you likely already know, this event is part of our summer-long Advice and Perspective series, which is a chance for UConn alumni to come virtually, in this case, back to campus and share some lessons that they've learned since graduation with our current students. And we're really excited because this summer, we've really strategically chosen to feature our series around Black alumni and giving them the opportunity to share their experiences and perspectives on navigating the workplace as Black professionals. And also a unique element of this summer series is that all of our featured alumni were majors in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and have graduated with degrees from CLAS. So all of them can speak to that liberal arts career exploration journey, and I'm sure we'll hear a bit more about that from both of our presenters later today. The format of today's event is going to be a fireside chat style. So essentially what that means is you will hear largely for about 40 minutes a conversation between myself and our two panelists. We have some prepared questions. We'll go through those questions as well as anything else that our presenters would like to add. And then around 3:40, we will shift to the Q&A portion of our event, where we will take questions from the audience about anything the presenters have already spoken about or anything additional. So throughout the session, we invite you to go ahead and submit questions using the chat feature. You're welcome to submit them just to everyone using the public chat feature, or if you'd like to submit them more anonymously or more privately, you can send a direct message to Aaliyah, and she will be monitoring the questions as they come through. The session will also be recorded. So if you would like to review it later, you're welcome to do that. Or if you would like to kind of go back and rewatch some key points that you'd like to reiterate, you're gonna have a chance to do that as well. So I think without further ado, those are all the logistics, and I'm really, really excited to go ahead and get started with our presenters today. So without me introducing them, because I think you both will do yourselves more justice, I would love to have both Ashton and Jordan answer our first question of the day, which is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journeys since you left UConn? And Ashton, can I have you go first with this one?
Sure. So I am a graduate of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences from UConn in the year of 2011, majored in political science. I tried to minor in sociology, that didn't work so well. But since college, being in school, not really knowing what I wanted to do, I switched my major early on from biological science to political science. Kind of navigating through my 4 years at school, I ended up deciding I want to do political science. I thought I wanted to take a career path in sports and entertainment law, which I didn't finalize or realize until my senior year. So I had to take a year off. And what I decided to do in that year off was work at the Apple store. And that's where I grew my love for IT, which is where I find myself now. I'm currently a Scrum Master Senior Advisor for Evernorth, which is a department of Cigna, which is a health services company. And so I've been there for 7 years now, and I came through the avenue of our technology early career development program, which is a program where we rotate every year within different areas within Cigna and gain expertise in particular areas, whether that's project management, systems analysts, business analysts, to now more kind of agile roles like product owner, Scrum Master, developer, so on and so forth. So that's how I found my way to the career I am now. 10 years ago, since it's been almost 10, 11 years since graduating from UConn, would I have seen myself here? No, but happy that I am here. Enjoy what I do on a day-to-day basis, and honestly continuing growing, since this really wasn't my field of expertise, since it really doesn't have too much to do with political science, but that's where my career has led me to the current moment. Jordan.
Sorry about that, I had myself muted. I'm Jordan Bennett. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm also was a poli-sci major, graduating in 2011. But the funny thing is, for me, I started college as a finance major. So I was in the School of Business actually, and then shifted over. I changed my major 4 times, I think, and ended up with poli-sci, and I think I actually love it. I think for me, I was more interested in international relations than anything, but I figured out later down the road, poli-sci was what was best for me. As far as my career in itself, I think as my junior year, I was president of the West Indian Student Organization, and I sort of dealt with something on campus, and a tragedy sort of helped me realize that PR or communications within the political realm was something that was a best fit for me. And like most people graduating, I was on the job hunt trying to figure out where I would land, and I actually found my first job on Craigslist, and which is like sort of random, but when you're looking, you're trying to find a gig, something just pops up, and I ended up being the personal aide for a mayoral candidate, and from there, my career just sort of continued in the political space, and I've had blips of different things here and there in other industries and higher education and commercial real estate, but that's sort of the gist of it.
Great, thank you both for those awesome introductions. I know that both of you have had very windy careers in terms of like exploring different areas and kind of taking some time to do some exploration before you really landed on what it is that you wanted to do. So I think we can dive into that a little bit throughout our conversation today, but I also know that the theme of our conversation today is how the two of you found a sense of belonging as both friends and professionals. Because one detail I think it's also important to mention is that the two of you did know each other when you were at UConn and were really good friends at that time and have continued to be friends after graduation. And so I'd like to dive into that a little bit more as our first topic for today, and start by asking, why was that chosen as a topic for today's conversation? Why is it something that you feel is so important to have conversations about, especially in the context of this event, which is really focused on giving some of your best advice back to current UConn students? So I know, Ashton, you were really instrumental in choosing this theme, so maybe I'll have you kick off, and then Jordan, if you want to add anything about why this theme is also important to you, I think that would be great.
Sure.
Okay, and so I'll just give a quick background, as Lisa alluded to. Jordan and myself were actually roommates. We came through UConn through the SSS program. We were roommates then, and then that moved on to us being a part of the community service learning community our freshman year. We were also roommates then, which led to our friendship. Then for the first half of my sophomore year, Jordan was also my RA. And so our friendship is kind of blossomed since that summer of 2011. But to speak to the purpose and why I thought or believed that this was a good topic for us to speak to, especially due to the climate that we're dealing with today from last year and kind of everything that occurred with George Floyd's death and kind of the promotion of Black Lives Matter and social activism, it's just feeling a sense of belonging, right? And that compiles into numerous different things: self-confidence, self-love, self-awareness. And I know just growing up, being first-generation college student, being a West Indian, first-generation American of a West Indian family, just growing up, my mother always told me, and it's pretty much cliche, and I'm pretty sure Jordan probably heard it as well, just navigating through our life is, in order to be successful in life, we have to do double the amount of work, right? So we always have to go a step above just to get to the entry level. Just to get our foot into the door, we have to do twice as much work, do twice as hard. And so being ingrained and instilled in that, just growing up, you kind of, as much as my mom was trying to promote hard work, right, and delivering that, you also kind of got that feeling of like, well, am I not good enough to my counterparts, right? I have to do double the work to be seen as equal, right? And so just those underlying things as you just navigate through high school, middle school, high school, college, and then even going to the professional world, just having that underlying, am I good enough, right? And just trying to understand and feeling that belonging. And personally speaking, even going into profession that wasn't something that I graduated with. It's in IT, something completely different. And so even kind of feeling, do I belong here? Questioning like, should I be here? How did I get here? And how do I maintain my career and kind of grow? It took a while for me to try to figure out what that sense of belonging is. And it's still something that I continue to work on and grow with. But I feel like it's prime advice just to grow and navigate through your career, not only through college, but professionally, and just trying to figure out your self-worth, your self-belonging, and understanding how to get here, where to get here, and then the tools that you would need to kind of feel that sense of belonging.
Yeah,
Jordan, I don't know if there's anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to supplement that, I think for me, as someone who is Black and queer and West Indian, all these different labels and identities, I think I've struggled a large part of my career figuring out where I fit in, what makes sense to me, where I feel most comfortable, and really where I belong. And so to be a part of this conversation and help and speak to others who are maybe on that same journey was something I was really excited about. And I think I've had the opportunity to work for some really prestigious people and organizations, and to sort of be in those same spaces and figuring out what it means to actually belong is something I'd love to sort of share and talk about.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you both for sharing why this topic is so important to the both of you. And I think, Jordan, your last comment there is a really good segue into my next question, because I think the topic of belonging is a little bit ambiguous in some ways. Like there's not a really clear definition or a widely understood definition of what belonging means. And I think that's partly because it looks different for different people. And so I was wondering if maybe to dive into that a little bit further, could each of you share, what does belonging actually mean to you? Like how do you assess belonging, whether it's in your personal or professional life? I don't know if those are the same or different, and maybe some indicators that you might suggest others look for when they're also trying to assess their belonging. And Jordan, maybe you can kick us off with this one.
Sure. I think speaking maybe professionally first, I think my sense of belonging has always really been tied to making a difference or having a positive impact. And the thing for me that I had to sort of to sort of think about or remind myself of when I'm is really that I belong in every room I enter. And so do you, right? And so sometimes, especially when we're more junior, I think we often hold back in rooms that we don't belong in. And I say that because belonging could mean maybe you don't look like the people in the room. You don't feel like you share their identity. You don't share their similar values. Maybe you think differently. Maybe you, the way you like look is different. Maybe you're taller and everyone's shorter. But I think for me, I sort of just see that sense of belonging and think through like, I belong in every space, and I remind myself that in every room I walk in, every table I'm a part of, and that I'm there for a reason. And I don't know, I think I also look at it as like, I don't have to actually belong in the traditional sense. And I think it's obviously took me a long way to get there, but although I may not look like everyone in the room or share those similar values, I think we belong in that we share that same. So as I mentioned, for me, my sense of belonging has been tied to having a positive impact. And so for me, when I'm in that room, I remember like, hey, I'm here because we share that same value. Like we're all trying to push the same agenda forward, we care the same thing. So although we may look differently or come from different backgrounds or come from different economic statuses, for me, I think there's power in that, and there's power in my voice and the difference that I sort of contribute to every space.
And I'll just segue off of Jordan, and he used the word power, right? And I think that's incremental in just like, how do you identify belonging, right? And there's power in language, power in presence, power of knowledge, right? And power of self, right? And so just including all those things professionally, right? Being able to, like Jordan said, going into a room, there's various demographics, gender, color, height, tattoos, hairstyles. There's so many different things where you can feel like you're not the right fit. And I guess the understanding that I had to learn is there's never the perfect fit, right? But it's the ability to know that I can add value to this conversation, add value to this room. And then being able to understand that, I think that's how you find self-belonging, self-confidence, self-worth. It's just, you can add value to whatever room you step into, whatever call you go on to. It's just finding that value, understanding that value, it's having confidence in yourself. And that's where that belonging comes in. I belong here, right? And just being confident that you belong here. And it could be a different profession, right? I'm not in IT, but I can provide something. There's something that I've learned and something in my experience that I can bring to the table and provide value. And so that's what I would say belonging is. It's just, how can I identify where I add value? And that trickles down to self-confidence, right? In where you are. And so.
Yeah, I love that connection that both of you made there between belonging and power and confidence and value. I think that those aren't terms that are always talked about together, but the way that you just sort of positioned it, I think that it really does make sense to talk about all those things together as related to one another. So I think my follow-up question to that for you is, both of you shared sort of some examples of like when you're already in a space, how you can assess your sense of belonging. Do you think that there are ways, especially in a professional context, to sort of assess belonging before you enter a space, like perhaps in an interview or when you're like researching an opportunity? Or do you think that that's challenging and that's something that really is hard to assess until you're actually in a scenario?
I think it's definitely something you can assess before. I think obviously it's something that's super personal, something everyone should assess for themselves. But I think for me specifically, it's something I definitely think about before. I think the biggest driver for me is, do I align with the mission or the public official, right? So for me, I work in politics, and so it's normally for a public official or for an organization. And so they're usually mission driven or have a goal or pushing policy forward or something. And for me, the biggest thing is, hey, do I agree with the senator's policies or his agenda? And then after that, is this a good cultural fit for me? And obviously, and I've been the only Black or queer employee at places before, so that's not new to me. But it's thinking about, like, is my Blackness appreciated and respected, or is there an expectation that I'll be the voice for the Black race or the LGBTQ community? And then is that something I want, or is it something I'm sort of not on board for? And is that a fit for me? And also some things like, is the expected work style something that works for me, and is a place that I feel like I belong in and thrive in? And then are the people thoughtful and strategic? So I think for me, it's just like, I think through those things that are important to me and sort of offer me a sense of belonging. Even I think recently, I was like interviewing for jobs, and I came down to three of them. One with a mayor's office, and in a different state, and one for a Duke and Duchess, and then one for, right now I'm with the governor's office, the governor of New York, as his spokesperson. And so when considering all three of those opportunities, they're all three different cultures, three different kinds of people, three different policymakers. And I think I had to think through which was the best fit for me. Would I feel comfortable going to work every day? Would I feel valued? Would I feel like my contributions would be respected and sort of given a voice within those spaces? And so for me, I ended up feeling like I felt like I would belong mostly with Governor Cuomo's office, which is why I'm here.
And so I'll go off of that, and I'll take it into kind of two different segments, right? And I'll just bring it along in terms of like interview. So pre-interview and then during the interview. And so leading up to interviews, obviously doing as much research you can on the company. So obviously there is Google, so you can do Googles, try to figure out what their company culture is, their mission statements. I think also word of mouth, whether that's going on LinkedIn, trying to find people there, connecting with them, asking questions, or if you know people in that organization. For myself, I knew someone who was in the technology early career development program at Cigna. And so I reached out to him to kind of get his feedback on what his experience was, what the interview process was, what company culture is. And then from there, during the interview, those are questions you can honestly ask people. I know I've conducted interviews for our program, and just interviews for candidates for just positions within my area. And so a lot of the times people can ask, hey, what's the culture like? What's the, just understanding what the cultural fit is. And because even as you go through the interview, being on the other end of trying to find people, you kind of analyze, are they a good cultural fit, right? And so those are things you can kind of experience, try to understand the people that you're interviewing on a personal level, and they'll open up. People want to talk about themselves all the time. And so you'll be able to understand that with people you're interviewing with. But one thing that I personally ask for in any position that I go to is there a mentorship program? What does that guideline look? How do you mentor the people that you bring into your organization? If they don't have those things, then are they truly invested in you, right? And seeing you grow? Is there a plan, a success plan? Like, what does that look like? And so understanding those expectations, and if they are truly invested in you, right? Or you feel that cultural fit, that's how you can find that sense of belonging. If they know that, hey, they already have like a mentorship program for people that are applying to this position, that's a culture that they're investing in their employees. And so that's something to look forward to. That'll be my advice.
And one thing I'll add from what Ashton said, yeah, I think in the beginning he shared like a sort of a two-pronged approach, but I think he hinted about doing a lot of research ahead of time, and I think he was fortunate to have folks or know folks within the company before he applied. But I think one thing that's helpful is not being afraid to sort of reach out to folks on LinkedIn that you may not know that work with the company. I've done that before, and it's been really, really helpful. And just say like, hey, I just want to reach out. I'm interviewing with this company. I know you've been there for a while. I'd love to talk more about what it's been like for you, how your experience has been like with them. And it's been really, really helpful. And it's been not only helpful in learning more about the organization as it is, but I think that person can potentially be a voice for you and advocating for you to be hired there. And so that's one thing I'll add to that.
Yeah, I would third that advice as well. I think LinkedIn is a very powerful tool to get those personalized opinions about a company, much more than you can read in, articles online or even the news sometimes. So I definitely think that's a great strategy. And to dig like one little bit deeper into that concept of maybe reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn or maybe even in an interview, both of you hinted at like some questions you might want to ask. So Ashton, you mentioned like, what's the cultural fit like, or how would you describe the company culture? Are there any other things that either of you have found that it might be helpful to ask about, like very explicitly? Because I know sometimes asking questions as big as like, can you describe the organizational culture? That leaves things like very up to the person you're asking to kind of like take that answer in whatever direction they want to. They might not speak to race or gender or sexuality or kind of like the diversity, equity, inclusion side of things. So are there any other questions or like specific asks that you might recommend making to either an interviewer or a contact?
Yeah, I'll take that first, Jordan. So what I would say is other things you can ask for are, one, what does the manager relationship look like? How do you communicate with your manager? Sometimes those things bode well into mentorships as well. One of my second manager has become a close friend and also one of my mentors after I rotated out of that position, and it's helped navigate my career at Cigna and also helped me feel that sense of belonging, right? Not the same race, same gender, but different cultures, but able to connect and help me grow. And him providing me the feeling of belonging, right? Because I didn't do well my first rotation at Cigna, but he provided me the opportunity to redeem myself, learn and grow. And he's helped me tremendously on my growth at Cigna and helped me understand that I belong. So understanding what that manager relationship looks like, as well as opportunities to give back. Do they have community service events? I know Cigna has enterprise research groups, which I'm a co-lead for our partners and partnership and community research group, where we reach out to the Boys and Girls Club, or have like breast cancer awareness events, right? And so them providing you the autonomy to kind of go outside of just your role and do things for the community or whatever you're interested in. So you can ask things related to your interests, whether that's hiking or reading. These are all questions you can ask. Do you have opportunities to do things off the side of your desk? And do you have allocated time to do stuff off the side of your desk to help grow your career? And if those things align, if they say, hey, we have an opportunity for you to do community service, and that's something that you hold as a value that you have, and like there's things like I have a list of non-negotiables, things that I care about, that if they don't have this negotiable, then I'll look at another job. One thing is definitely a mentorship program, but then also the opportunities to do things off the side of the desk. Do you have opportunities for me to have stretch assignments in a particular area? So there's numerous things, but obviously try to find ways where they're invested in you and your growth will help expand your career, right? If they're invested in you and your growth, even if you start at the lower level, you'll be able to continue to go up.
I think one thing I'll also add, because I think Ashton, you mentioned mentorship programs a couple of times, and I'll also say knowing what works for you. Because I think I'm sort of similar where I appreciate a mentor, but I don't thrive in spaces where there's a mentorship in the workplace professional like that. Like I think I thrive when they're like out of the company or out of that space. And so for me, I know that going into the door. So I know that, hey, like, although that works for some people, that's not going to work for me, or it's not going to help me achieve my goals as I would like to achieve them, because then I sort of be overthinking everything. And I know that going in, right? But I think just to go back to your question, Lisa, I think one thing I would also ask about is maybe even if they have like ERG groups, which are employee resource groups. And I think Ashton mentioned Cigna has something similar as it relates to community service and involvement in the community, but there are other groups that focus on specific issues that folks identify with. So maybe there's like a Black group for their Black employees, or a queer group for the LGBTQ employees, or for folks who are from like when I was living in DC, there was a Connecticut State Society, a group for people from Connecticut. So just figuring out like where, if there are groups that you can be a part of, maybe that really help to create that same feeling of belonging.
Right. Yeah. And just to go off of that, yeah, there's numerous ones. Women's, I'm a co-lead in the Black one, but as like in like even in these committees, they'll have subcommittees for things that you care about. So of the larger branch of like the Black and African American ERG group at Cigna, I'm a co-lead for the emerging partnership and communities one. So there's definitely opportunities to get back and just try to find those things like Jordan said. And if those companies do have those things accessible for you, then obviously those are things that can help you find that sense of belonging, right? If they align with your beliefs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great sign too that even though the both of you are in very different industries, this is similar advice that we're hearing, because I think that these are trends and efforts that companies are really engaging in pretty much across the board nowadays. So really, you know, whatever industry our students on the call are in, I hope that they'll be able to at least look for and hopefully find some similar opportunities within their companies or within the companies that they're going to be applying for in the next couple of years. So I think that's some really great advice on that front.
And Lisa, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have one other thing to add as well. You can also ask about trainings. Like, what does the employee trainings look like? I know particularly Cigna has an unconscious bias training, right? And so things that are subtle that people might not understand, to train your employees on what are some unconscious bias that you might have, also kind of would make you feel comfortable in your workspace as well. I know I've had conversations with some of my friends who are Black women, and even just the concept of hair, right? And other of their coworkers asking about their hair or touching their hair. Just sometimes those are lines that you don't want to cross, but they might not know, right? And so how is the training for the organization and kind of calling these things out so that people know, and also making you feel comfortable, right? So just want to make that call out as well. You can ask about the types of training they do offer.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great thing to add to the list, because I think training, especially mandatory training, is very telling of like what the company's values are and what they really expect of their employees. That's a great addition. Thank you, Ashton. And I'd like to, you know, have my next question focus a little bit on each of your like individual experiences finding belonging in your careers, because I know, Jordan, something that you mentioned in that previous answer was really knowing what works for you. So, you know, mentorship styles can range very widely. You know, settings can be really different, and different, like whether it's in your industry or not in your industry, in your company, not in your company. So would both of you be willing to share, as, you know, successful Black men in different industries and different journeys, maybe a time where you felt like you had a really strong sense of belonging in a particular office or group or community, and then maybe a time where you felt something was off or not the best sense of belonging, and maybe like what you did or what came of both of those situations?
Jordan, do you want me to start that off, or how do you want to go about this? Would you like it? I could take it.
You're welcome.
Go ahead. Okay, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. So I will start with the first on kind of feeling a sense of belonging. And I have a couple of different mentors. One of my mentors is a senior director within Cigna, Black. So some of that I can align with. And so I'll go to him for questions, concerns, just how did he get there? What does he deal with? And just that feedback and those communications could kind of help me navigate through. I'm sorry, my AirPods dropped. Help me navigate through my career at Cigna. And then one of my other mentors, could everyone hear me? I just want to make sure people can hear me. Okay. And then one of my other mentors, also a senior director. So once again, just trying to find what works best for you. Some people might like manager, some people might like someone at a senior director, or something close to where you align. But her name's Wendy. She's a white woman and like in a completely different demographic, right? But if there is one mentor that I would say like truly makes me feel like a sense of belonging, and even where times where I lack confidence, she helps provide that confidence to me and helps me helps reassure my knowledge and my belonging. It's her, and we have a pretty personal relationship as well. So identifying what type of mentor relationship you have, there's numerous types, whether that's just particularly professional, right? Where it's all about professional kind of day-to-day work, or that's one where it's just personal, mixture of the two. And so she's one of my mentors it's a good mix of the two, right? And at one point I was within her organization, so she was able to help navigate me through the organization, help me find a job. But just having conversations, whether just how you have work-life balance, how have you gotten to the place where you're at? And she's a senior director and only had her bachelor's, and it was in an area that she wasn't, she didn't go to school for, and she took some time off when she was married to go to Thailand and kind of get
We may have lost Ashton, so until he comes back, I'll just top it and continue. So for me, there's been two, I think, examples. I think the first is of a challenging space I found of belonging in. I think an organization that most people are familiar with, Planned Parenthood. I used to serve as a community organizer for them covering the state of Connecticut. And so for me, I actually love them to death. They're a great organization. I really am passionate about reproductive rights. But when I joined them, I was actually, I ended up being the only guy, the only Black guy, which is sort of different, right? Because normally we want to make, I think most spaces, women aren't a huge majority in, and it was sort of the opposite. And I was sort of the only Black person and only male there, and specifically around an organization that's pushing for reproductive rights. And so that was sort of different for me, because I think in every conversation, every table I was sort of a part of, I sort of felt like I didn't have the courage to be vocal, because I felt like I was stepping on the toes of an issue that wasn't like my issue. But then I had to realize, as I mentioned earlier in the call, that you belong in every space you walk in, every table you're a part of, and every room you're in. And I think for me, I had to remember that reproductive rights, for example, are more than just about, they're not just a women's issue, they're everyone's issue, right? And so I think that was something I had to remind myself of. And when I sort of like figured that out in my head, I started to create a sense of belonging for myself. Because I think for me, my sense of belonging comes from being aligned with the mission, being aligned with a goal, and being sort of feeling like I'm having a positive impact. And once I felt that I sort of was a part of that mission, I felt like I actually belonged, and I could actually be more productive and have more of an impact. So that's something how I overcame sort of that. I think. Sorry, Ashton, I'll let you go. I'll let you continue. I know you dropped off.
No. You finish off. You finish off, and then I'll circle back around. Sorry about that. I'll circle back around.
No. And I think it was the complete opposite. I think the time I was in an organization that a similar time I was in an organization that I wasn't in a fit. It was sort of the opposite. It wasn't a fit because of I actually couldn't even pinpoint, to be honest with you, what made it not a fit. It was something that I didn't really, the work wasn't the right fit. The culture wasn't a fit. I didn't really mesh well. And I was seeking mentorship in an organization where there wasn't really an opportunity for that. However, I had built like a really strong relationship with the head of the company, the CEO, and I asked him for coffee, actually, to just really chat about my growth in the company and next steps and what it looked like, and just sort of pick his brain on sort of what made sense in the company. And he asked me what I was passionate about, and we talked about that for a bit. And my passion then was really PR in the company, and my work at the company was doing content marketing and advertising, and then like project management and other work. And he said, Jordan, I think the issue is that this just isn't the place for you. And he goes, so I'm going to give you 2 weeks, and then I'm going to let you go. Let you go meaning fired, like leave, which is terrifying. And I'm super junior. I think I was, I don't even know, maybe like 23 or 24 at this point. And I'm just like, oh my God, living in DC. I'm absolutely broke. I don't know what I'm going to do right now. But I think what I had realized early on is that when I'm in a space where I don't feel like I necessarily belong, I tap into one of my strengths, which is my ability to network, and I become like a huge networker. And so up until this point, I had built a broad network in DC, and then when I got this news, I sort of shifted into networking mode. And so I realized, like, okay, in 2 weeks, I need to have a new opportunity because I won't have one here any longer. And so I did. I was doing, I think, a coffee here, dinner here with someone, drinks here with someone, really just like putting my name out there, connecting with folks. And I had a job in a week and a half, and I was able to sort of secure something before I even left, which obviously I know is very rare, but it was sort of just like, it's identifying and realizing like, hey, although I don't belong, there's something that benefited me from it, right? I was pushed out of the door of a space that wasn't a good fit for me, but I ended up in a space that was really good for me. I ended up in the DC mayor's office as her deputy press secretary, and that was much more aligned with my mission, much more aligned with my goals. It was a much better cultural fit for me, and it sort of just worked out. Ashton, sorry about that. I'll let you go ahead.
No, sorry about that. Sorry, everyone, for losing connection. I don't even know where I left off at, but I'll just go off of kind of where Jordan was leading off with, and one of my experiences where I didn't feel like I belong. And once again, I'll go back to my mentorships because they've helped me tremendously throughout my career. And just one thing that I've learned is managing your expectations of yourself. And there was a point in time where I picked a role because once again, for Cigna, we transitioned every year. We did a rotation every year, and I did a role in project management. And going into that role, I had a very tough start to my last rotation, but ended off very well. And so I was super confident. And going into this role, they had an expectation of someone who was a project manager, who's had project management experience for a couple of years. And this would have been my first rotation as a project manager. And even just asking my mentor, like, hey, what are your thoughts on this role? What are your thoughts on the manager, the area? And I didn't get too many glowing reviews, but then again, I thought, hey, I can manage this. I was able to manage a situation just recently where it didn't start off well, and I ended up doing very well towards the end. So it was one of those things where I had higher expectations for myself than what the role than what was actually true. And I know that's hard, but just understanding what your benefits are and kind of what works well. And so I took this role for project management, and I only lasted 6 months. It didn't work well with me and my manager. She had expectations that I couldn't meet. And obviously I kind of level set it with her, like, hey, this is my first project management. I'll try my best to kind of bridge that gap. But she was expecting someone who was a seasoned project manager. And it was something that I didn't have. I didn't have experience as I was continuing to grow. And so even as I'm trying to learn, grow, working extra hours, the work that I was doing and the extra work that I was putting in wasn't seen as me putting in extra work. It was always seeing me just put it behind, to the point where they rotated me off. They told me I had 2 weeks to find, similar to Jordan, 2 weeks to find a new job. They even took away my seat. So they gave my seat to someone else. And so I had to try to find a new seat within the building. And then once again, kind of tapping into my mentors to try to navigate and network and finding new opportunities, where I eventually was able to find a job as a product owner, which is not necessarily similar to project management, but just the management of scope of work, right? So product owner, you own a product, and being able to be successful as a product owner. But once again, it was just that having the right area, listening to your mentors, having proper expectations for yourself and what you can truly deliver on, helped me find a job where I was very comfortable and very successful in as a product owner. But having that experience as a project manager, and not being able to align with my manager as well, I definitely say it's kind of like two in the same, right? This is a time where it didn't work, but it led to a time that did work. And so understanding those expectations, right? But and understanding what your level of confidence is, right? Your level of confidence is going to vary based off of whatever your level of expertise is at. And so not getting too far above yourself, as well as level setting with your manager as well, right? So setting expectations across the board, not only for yourself, but for the people you work with, will definitely help with just feeling a sense of belonging. Because I didn't feel like I belonged after a couple of weeks, which you can see in my work. I was double checking everything. I didn't feel confident in what I was providing. So just try to tread lightly on just understanding what your expectations are, for sure.
Yeah, thank you both so much for sharing all of those stories. I think it's really helpful to paint a picture of times where belonging was like very clear and evident, and times where it clearly wasn't, and how you navigated those scenarios. And one thing that I took away from those responses is the role that like self-awareness plays in all of that, because I think both of you referenced the concept of, you know, knowing the difference between like being in a situation where you don't belong versus being in a situation where you're not good at what you're doing, and making that distinction very clear, and then being able to, you know, recognize that and do something about it, whether it's, you know, Jordan, in your case, relying on your strength of networking to find another opportunity that was a better fit for you, or Ashton, you know, realizing that the expectations were, it's not that you weren't doing a good job, but it's like that they were very unrealistic, and then, you know, being able to turn that situation into a better one. I think that's important to keep in mind, because I think sometimes we can internalize scenarios that aren't working out to mean that, you know, it's we're the one who is doing something wrong, or it's like a problem, but that's not necessarily always the case. Sometimes it is, but not always. And I think belonging can definitely play a role in that. So thank you both again for sharing those stories. I'd like to throw out one more question before we move into the Q&A that we've been receiving. And that is bringing things back to the fact that the two of you are friends, and that you have different professional journeys, but you've stayed in touch all these years and definitely relied on each other in a variety of ways. So I'd love to ask, how have you supported one another in like finding a sense of belonging as friends? And what taking that a step further, what advice might you have for our current students to either emulate or sort of like, use their existing and current connections in a equally as helpful way as the two of you have?
Yeah, I can start off first. It looked like you were looking, like you're thinking of it.
The
Is
wheels
that
are
right?
turning.
Yeah, so I'll take it. Just honestly, just your experience that you have with each other. If you don't have confidence in yourself, hopefully you have a group of friends around you that have, if not equal or more confidence in you and your skills. And so Jordan was definitely that, whether it was in college or outside of college. And just when I felt down, having someone to call, kind of vent, talk through, and kind of just help try to figure out what are you doing with your life, like what's next, and then even just seeing their experience and how they grow. Just seeing Jordan go through all the jobs that he has and kind of seeing where he lands now, right? It's true. Like if your friends are also your role models, then you're in a good place, right? And that helps you with your confidence and building where you need to be, and even just pushing you, right? And so Jordan will be the one to push me to make sure that I'm accelerating in my career, that I'm not staying stagnant. And even like now, like I feel like it's a time and point where I need to grow and push myself to the next level. And Jordan will be the one to push me and be like, what are you doing? How is work? Are you feeling complacent? Like what's going on? Because Jordan knows me very well. And so just having someone that knows you and kind of knowing when you're at your lows and help pick you up when you're at your lows, but also kind of celebrate when you're at your highs as well. Just because you're going to go through, and one of my mentors told me, and it's something that going into the corporate world you never think about, but failure is going to happen. But when you fail fast and learn from that. And so never staying too down and hard on yourself, and then having a group of people around you that will help you grow. I just need to get rid of these AirPods. That will have you grow, definitely helps with just feeling a sense of belonging, right? If you have a group that helps you feel like you belong, even if you don't, that confidence will definitely lead into your professional career.
Yeah, I think I'd absolutely agree 100%. I think when you said my wheels were turning or whatever, I think my thought was, do I want to share this or not? And I was going to say, most folks don't know this, but Ashton is the first person I came out to actually in college. And it's relevant to this because it was a time where I was really struggling with my identity and like what I'm doing and who I was and where everything is. And he was my roommate, but it's sort of, we have developed a relationship where it became like someone who was sort of, I felt like I could trust with things, right? And I felt supported by. And so going from that space to a time where we're both different career places, when I'm in a time where I'm thinking through like what makes sense for me, what's a good fit, what isn't a good fit, I can rely on someone who really knows me like really, really well, inside and out, and is not going to sort of just sugarcoat things for me or give me BS, who can give it to me straight. And I think there's value to that. And there's always someone, I think, that will do that for you. And whether you don't have a friend in your life that can do that right now, there's always a possibility of making someone or adding someone in to do that. Because I think people love to talk about themselves and give advice. Maybe they don't admit it, but they do. And I think there's always someone to sort of lean on. I think when it comes to belonging specifically, I forgot what you mentioned before, Lisa, but there's something that came to mind for me. It was related to how we found a sense of belonging. And I think I do have 3 thoughts for folks. Who, if you're ever in a company or in a space where you find it challenging to find a sense of belonging, I'd say the first thing to do is think about, is there something you can do to create a space there? Can you create an ERG group? Are there folks that you can connect with maybe in different departments? Is there maybe someone doing something similar? Is there something you can create? The second would be, what can you do to find your people? And I say that because sometimes the people might not be in that company or that organization, but maybe if we work in tech or a tech industry, like in New York, I have tons of friends here that work at Twitter, and they now connect with tons of people like Google and Facebook and other places. And if they don't find folks that really connect with them or feel like they find their people within an organization, they go elsewhere to do that. And I think that's a similar thing across industries. And then 3 is the thing is, to sort of check yourself and figure out, is this the right place for me? And I think Ashton and I both had moments in our lives where we had to figure out, I was told it wasn't the right place, but I think we figured it out separately, that it wasn't the right place for us. And once you figure it out, it's really acting on that and really figuring out like what's the best move for you. So having clarity and acting, I think, are really 2 things that are helpful.
Yeah, that's all such good advice. And I just have to say that your friendship is super inspirational. It's ever since the first time I think the four of us met to sort of start planning this event, we could really see how the two of you have been such instrumental supports for one another throughout your careers. And I think it's really great that you have been in that role for each other. And I do also hope that, you know, all the students on the call have someone that they could see growing with in that way. And if not, I'm sure that Ashton and Jordan would be happy to answer questions about like maybe how to seek out or how to find like that type of person and really how to build that relationship. So feel free to throw some questions in the chat about that. Speaking of which, at this point, I would love to switch over to some Q&A to make sure we have time to get through some of the questions that were submitted. And our first question is specifically related to like rebounding. So Ashton, the question is directed specifically towards you. What steps did you take to rebound from that first rotation at Cigna that didn't really go well? But I would also like to expand that question a little bit too and ask like more broadly, like we all have hiccups in our careers where things just don't go well, whether it's related to sense of belonging or not. And I know Jordan, you spoke about a few as well. So in situations like that, what do? What are some of the next steps?
Right, and so there's two things you can truly do, and that's either stay down or get yourself back up. And it's trying to figure out, where did I go wrong? Being self-aware of kind of your missteps, right? Where did I go wrong? What could I have done to do better? How can I do better moving forward? And just learning from every experience that you have, every failure that you have, there's a learning opportunity there. I honestly, even just like power of language, right? I try to say like, this is what I'm not good at, right? It's just, those are areas of opportunity, right? The spaces where I can grow, and understanding that. And owning it. I think the biggest thing is owning it, understanding that you're intelligent, and it was something that I was just listening to in the background when I was at work today, and just hearing on the TV, and someone just saying, understanding that if you're smart enough and you have the will to succeed, you will succeed. And it's so simple, but so true, right? If you are self-determined, if you really want to grow, there's nothing that can truly stop you, right? And just trying to figure out different ways. And whether that's with the organization that you're in or not. I was in an area which was called prod support. So you're just there's constantly issues going on. And that was my first rotation. And I didn't have the support system to grow. My manager changed 2 weeks into me getting the job. Also, the job that I accepted changed 2 weeks after I got the job. And so I went to something that was completely different than what I was expecting, or even what I tried to plan for going into the role, right? And so learning that and saying, hey, do you foresee anything going into my next rotation? Hey, do you foresee anything changing as we start the job? Like, is there anything that's coming down the pipeline that you know of that I should know about? My first rotation, I didn't really have anyone that I can go to. So just making sure that, and even my manager, I didn't have a really close relationship. My manager didn't work in office, they worked from home. So that was something else, like my next manager has to be in office, right? So someone could keep me accountable of what I'm doing, right? Because I didn't have a manager there my first rotation, I wasn't able to stay on track. So just having a manager that's there, that can check in on me, make sure that I'm doing my work, having a mentor, having a succession plan, like what are the steps for helping me grow? I didn't have that going into my first rotation. But believing in yourself, you're going to get to a point. Everyone's going to fail. That's just the part of the corporate life. In life in general, you're going to fail. But that's how you grow, right? And understanding that those opportunities where you might not have achieved what you were looking to achieve are also the opportunities for you to grow and figure out, what can I do to do better? I love constructive feedback, because that's the only way I'm going to grow. If I'm perfect at everything, then I can't grow in any way, shape, or form. But just being aware of that and owning it and wanting to drive and get past that is definitely how I got out of my first rotation, and finding someone that believed in you, which is what my manager was, someone that believed in me and gave me a second chance.
I also love feedback, so I love hearing that. It's I think I thrive in it, and I want to ask for everyone. But I think for me, the first thing I'd say is give yourself some grace. I think when you're knocked down, I think some people just sort of like, they hold it against themselves, and they get super emotional and they break down. But like, let it go. It's okay. It happens. And I think if you have that attitude that, this is going to happen, it's normal, and that you just like let it happen in that moment, and you say, all right, now it's time to kick ass. Now it's time to pick my things up and put in some work and actually do the work. I think that's when things change. I think one of my former colleagues, I used to work for Hillary's campaign, and someone on her team used to always say the same thing. Everyone wants to do the work until it's time to do the work. And that means sort of everyone likes to talk about it and like talk a big game, but when it's time to do the work, most people just like shy away from it or love to put it onto someone else and not do it. But like, give yourself some grace, but then do the work, not just talk about it. Like you have to actually put in that work to get to where you want to be, and and you have to just sort of just push forward and not be afraid to do it. I think that's my suggestion.
Yeah, all that is good advice. I would third everything that was just said as well. And just to add a little bit of a personal anecdote on it as well, I know that like after college, you know, when you're still in school, failing is very different than when you're in the like professional workplace and you fail for the first time or something doesn't go as planned for the first time. And I know for me, that adjustment was like really, really shocking and like really hard to make. But I appreciate everything that you just said, Ashton and Jordan, that like it happens. It's not the end of the world. If you dwell on it, it might become a bigger issue or become something that is, you know, really problematic. But, you know, moving on and giving yourself grace and learning from it and growing from it, I think is a great approach to take. So thank you both for sharing that advice.
I was gonna say one thing I actually appreciate now, and like people who work under me, is like I expect people to make mistakes, but when they like, you know, Jordan, I messed up, but like we're gonna figure this out and we're gonna get done. I love that. It's just like, oh, like I can just continue to step back because I know that he's gonna figure it out now because he doesn't want to make two mistakes. Or like if he does, like I can, you know what I mean? Or I can know like if he does, that means maybe I should step in and help in a different way that I'm not doing properly. But it's like I think having that attitude I really love and it's helpful. Yeah,
that's a great point as well. Owning it can be a big step in the right direction. So I appreciate that addition. So our next question for the both of you is, you both mentioned this fragile time that we're in right now. How can you tell if an employer is just making a blanket like diversity statement if you're doing your research and you see that among your research versus actually doing to be something more inclusive? I'm nervous to apply and be invested and then find out later that the company's actions are just performative.
Yeah, I think you can be comfortable asking about it. Obviously, I think you like messaging and the way you communicate something like that is important. But I think it came so quick to my mind because I had that recently, and I was interviewed, and I realized it was I'm not going to share the name of the company, but I was going through all their employees, and I realized that the person who was interviewing me was talking about all the work they were doing as it relates to. Not the work they were doing, but how they feel on these issues as it relates to this current social movement around Black lives. And I shared with her, I was like, oh, I'd love to hear more about what the company is doing or internally, because I did notice that there were no people of color on the team section of your website. And I obviously asked her about it in a nice way, but it was an important question. I wanted to hear her response to it. And she said, she's like, you know, yeah, it's just like I don't remember her exact language, but it essentially led to me to realize that it wasn't a priority for them. And it was something that they wanted to talk about, but not actually do or prove in action. And for me, that was something that helped me to realize quickly, like, oh, I would actually sort of be a checklist for them rather than an addition to their team that would complement them in a strategic and thoughtful way. And so I realized really quickly, like, hey, this isn't something that makes sense for me. And that's nothing that you have to necessarily like bring down on them and come down hard or communicate with them, but you know, like, hey, this is where your interview process ends with them. And this is where you take a step back and figure out, like, you know, maybe a different company is a better fit.
Right. And I think the question is being afraid to apply, right? And I think one thing that I just had, and I know it's just a little bit off topic, but that I heard from my church sermon this past week is not allowing fear to conquer you, right? And so you'll never truly know, right? Especially when you're applying, what that organization is going to be like. But you can ask those difficult questions, and based off of those questions, you'll be able to identify where they actually stand. I know last year when it happened, I was looking, and once again, I work at Cigna, I was looking for them to put out some type of statement on the events that happened. And we didn't see that in a timely manner. And one thing that I appreciated is our CEO at the time had a town hall, and at the end of the town hall had a Q&A. And someone of color called him out on it, blatantly, just right on because you can call in, they asked the question. Actually, no, it wasn't a town hall. He specifically had, he reached out to the African American and Black ERG to have an open chat with the group and then the members of the group, and obviously it went out to anyone that was on our distribution. So that's how he had, because in our town halls, they don't have open-ended questions, people can talk. But someone called him out on it. And what he did was say, I will make a change. He apologized for it, but then owned it. And then literally, I think it was either that day or the following day, sent out a message to everyone in the organization, as well as there was a tweet, but there was instant change. And it's one of those things where sometimes they might not have understood or understood the severity of it. And like, I think, and me and Jordan have this conversation all the time on just like, you knowing what you know or ignoring something that you should know. And he checked me on something of recent, on something that I said, hey, I knew nothing about. And he said, well, why didn't you research it? Why didn't you do the work to understand? And he's laughing because it was literally maybe like a month ago. But yeah, you'll see those things and ask those difficult questions in interviews. And off their responses, you'll be able to get a feeling for where their organization stands and kind of where they are culturally. So it's okay to ask those tough questions. That's what they're there for.
I think one thing you reminded me of also, Ashton, is when you mentioned that research piece, in addition to looking for sort of statements, I think a lot of organizations that if they are doing work in the community around related things, they normally have it somewhere, right? If they do a foundation, you can see where that money is going. You can see like those kinds of things. And so like, if that's something that's important to you, you can obviously look into those as well.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that as another example of how the two of you have leaned on one another as friends and professionals. So perfect way to almost wrap us up there. I think we have time for probably one last question before some final thoughts. So Ashton, this question is directed to you specifically. How much, and maybe a quick answer, how much does your political science background influence your current career in the tech industry? And how do you apply the skills and knowledge you learned from poli-sci to tech?
Yeah, it's the interpersonal skills, the communication skills, dealing with ambiguity. So it might not necessarily always be technical based, but being able to navigate yourself, having conversations, talking to people. It's those interpersonal skills that sometimes people and I don't want to say everyone, but those are skills that might not always be something that's identified for people that are like developers, engineers, right? They're more heads down, code based, but having that ability to communicate, have conversations, talk, deal with ambiguity, deal with teams, being able to kind of be that bridge between the business and then IT was incremental. It was instrumental in my career, and just having that political science background, having to write all the papers. And it's funny because I hated writing papers. I was a math and science guy, and I picked a major that all I had to do was write papers. But having that ability to just talk, communicate, and be able to express yourself eloquently definitely helps in the IT profession for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, I think communication skills are important for pretty much any industry you're in. So that's a great answer. Thank you, Ashton. So I know we're a little bit short on time, but I just want to open up the floor one last time and ask each of you, for the students on the call today or the ones who are going to be watching it later, what is sort of one takeaway that you really hope that they keep with them from today's conversation?
I'm looking at Jordan. Do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Well, I know you're going to say mentorship.
No, I've been talking about it the entire time, so I'm gonna switch. I'm gonna do something different.
Okay, all right. I'll let you go. Kick it off.
Oh, okay. What my advice would be is, truly, and it's very simple, but love yourself. And I might steal Jordan's word because I absolutely love it, but just love yourself and give yourself grace. I don't know if were you gonna use that at all, Jordan?
Nope, I wasn't.
No, okay. So love yourself and give yourself grace, and all that will compile itself into feeling a sense of belonging, right? Know what your values are, your morals are, your non-negotiables. And like I said, with loving yourself, knowing that you add value, that you have a purpose, and that you're at the table for a reason. And know that you're there for a reason, and be there for a reason. Yeah. And so I'll let Jordan go because he's probably going to say something.
That part I was actually going to say. I was going to remind folks that they belong in every room they enter. And I was actually going to share an example. I think I do something myself actually to remind myself that in every room. So once you are more, I don't know who's on the call, they're professionals or students at the moment. But when you are a professional, oftentimes you have meetings with larger groups in conference rooms often. And sometimes there's not always room for everyone to sit around the table. And there's these chairs on the outside where there's room for everyone else to sit. And I make it a point to always sit at the table. And it's sort of a reminder to me personally that I should always be at the table, at the physical table, and I should always have a voice there and speak up. And so I never speak just to hear myself speak because I don't think that makes sense. But I do feel like when there's something that I feel like I can contribute to, I make sure I do, and I add value to that space and that conversation in the conversation. So I don't know. That's one thing I'll say is you do belong in every room you enter.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for those closing points. I think that like perfectly summed up our conversation today. And if we were in person, this is the point where we'd be clapping, but instead we'll give you a virtual round of applause. I see that Jordan just put your email address in the chat. Thank you so much for doing that. So to all the students on the call, this is an open invitation for you to reach out. I hope that you take advantage of that, as I think both Jordan and Ashton had some really great advice to share today. And it sounds like they're willing to stay in touch. And just before we close out, I just wanted to remind everyone that if you enjoyed today's session, we do have one last session in the Advice and Perspective series coming up. In just a second, Aaliyah will put the link in the chat for you to sign up for that remaining session. And just two quick plugs from the Center for Career Development. If you are looking to find a mentor, or you feel that mentorship is something you'd like to explore, we do have a platform called the Husky Mentor Network, where wonderful alumni just like Jordan and Ashton and many others have profiles, and they're actually willing to, the reason they signed up for the platform is to be mentors to current students and to provide advice. So feel free to check that out. And last but not least, if you want to process the information you heard today and maybe talk about how it can apply to your career, you're always welcome to schedule an appointment with the Center for Career Development to talk to Aaliyah, myself, another career coach. We are open throughout the summer, and we are very willing to help you process some of this information and figure out how to apply it to your own career journey. So with that, that is everything that we have for today. Thank you again so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Jordan and Ashton, for some amazing advice. And we hope to see all of you again sometime soon. Stay safe and stay well.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.